Hello everyone and welcome back to the Library of the Weird. I hope you're doing fine wherever you are. I'm really excited actually because I'm going to the movies tonight. I'm going to watch The Nun 2, which I'm really excited for. But I'm also a bit anxious because I'm doing something today I've never done before. If you've read the title of the video, you probably know that we are going to review Stephen King's latest novel, Holly. The thing is, I finished this book like 2 hours ago. Usually when I film videos, I've made a script beforehand with everything I want to say because I'm always really angry at myself when I missed something I wanted to talk about, but not this time. I wrote like a few notes in my notebook, nothing more. I hope this won't be too chaotic, so let's get into the book. So I should maybe preface this by saying that this review will be spoiler-free, at least plot-wise. I won't spoil major things happening in the plot. There's a few minor things I want to talk about, but I wouldn't consider them like spoilers. The other thing I wanted to say beforehand is that the main character in this book is Holly Gibney. Holly is a recurring character in some of Stephen King's novels. I think she was first introduced in a novel called Mr. Mercedes, and then she was in another book called The Outsiders. And I have not read any of them, but that did not hinder me in enjoying this book. There are some scenes where you notice, okay, yeah, this is like a reference to another book where she's in. But I mean, she's not the only character Stephen King has done this with, but you can very much read this book as a standalone novel. I at least enjoyed it very much. So the plot in this book starts in 2012 when a married retired professor couple, they're called Roddy and Emily Harris, kidnap another member of the faculty, Jorge Castro, and put him in a cell in their basement. There's a couple of these plot lines that take place before the current events. The bulk of this book takes place in July 2021 when Penny Dahl calls Holly Gibney, who's working as a private investigator, and she kind of recruits her to search for her missing daughter. When we first meet Holly Gibney, she's at a Zoom funeral for her mother. Like I said, the bulk of this novel takes place in July 2021, which is obviously in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, yeah, her mother died of COVID-19 because she didn't believe in it. And there's a Zoom funeral for her. And yeah, after a bit of thinking, Holly agrees to investigate the disappearance of the daughter of Penny Dahl. And she's thinking about it because her investigator partner also has COVID-19, so he can't help her, and she is supposed to be mourning. But she's talking to friends of her. There's, for example, Jerome and Barbara Robinson, which are siblings and seem to be very good friends of Holly. And yeah, she takes on the case and tries to find out what happened to Bonnie Ray Dahl, the daughter of Penny Dahl. And yeah, I don't really want to go into more details about the plot because I feel like this would spoil a lot of things. What's a bit different about this book, if you only know Stephen King as a horror writer, is that this is more of a, say, detective novel or a thriller. There are some horrible and horrific elements in this book, but I wouldn't call it a horror novel. And what makes this really, really interesting is that, like I said, we have multiple viewpoints, we have like multiple timelines. And when reading this book, we kind of know what's happening from both sides. We see Holly investigating the missing girl, but very soon we also see what's happening on the other side, like who has possibly abducted her, what happened to her, have similar things happen to other people. These are all things we learn in like the very beginning of the novel. But like I said, I don't really want to go into details about this. But what's so interesting about this type of storytelling is like we root for Holly to connect the dots, because so many things are so obvious to us because we know the other side of the story, but we just see her like missing clues and stuff like that. And I think this makes this type of storytelling really, really interesting and exciting. Another thing I really liked about this book is that there's not only one climax at the end of the book, but there's multiple of them. And with the first one, or maybe like the second one, I had a bit of difficulty because I felt like there's no stakes more in the story, but Stephen King really knows how to tell stories. And yeah, there are still a lot of stakes even after the event I talked about. And this makes this book exciting throughout. There's only a bit of exposition at the end, at the beginning. There's only a bit of exposition at the beginning, but when you reach the point that you're connecting clues and stuff like that, I think this book is a blast. I really, really burned through it. And this was the first novel in a long time that I really, really burned through. I also really did enjoy the themes in this book. I think one of the most important themes in here is grief and how different persons deal with different kinds of grief. Like I said, we meet Holly Gibney when she's at a funeral for her mother, and she's supposed to be mourning, but she has had a kind of difficult relationship with her mom. We meet several other mothers with missing children who didn't really have a chance yet to mourn the children because they're missing. There's one who was once a sober alcoholic, and after her son was abducted or went missing, she became an alcoholic again. There's Penny Dahl, the mother of the girl Holly is hired to investigate. She's also kind of in the midst of grieving, and yeah, there's a lot of mourning going around. Another theme of this book is age, or old age, and seeing one's body decay. On one side, we have like the Harrises, these retired professors who are very, very bad at dealing with their body aging. And on the other side of the spectrum, we meet Olivia Kingsbury, who is a famous poet and becomes the mentor of one of the friends of Holly, of Barbara. And I think when we meet her, she's almost turning 100, and she has a very different feeling about growing older. And it's really interesting to like explore those different ideas about the aging process. Another theme in this book is COVID-19, which is like, I wouldn't call it like a major theme, but it's kind of important for the plot. And I mean, in the real world, like today in September 2023, COVID kind of comes back. I have a few colleagues which had it already again, and it's probably not going away. And reading this book kind of felt like looking back at one of the worst times in the pandemic. People were dying, emergency rooms and hospitals were full. And this is something that you see on almost every page in this book. There's people wearing masks, asking each other, are you vaxxed? Are you not vaxxed? Is COVID a hoax? How important is like disinfecting your hands? Like not shaking hands, but giving each other the elbow. And I found it really, really interesting because I think like a lot of people have not forgotten, but it kind of went to the back of their mind. What actually changed during the pandemic, like how different was living in the pandemic from living before and even living after that, like today, for example. And I really found it interesting. I think it's like the second or third book I read where COVID-19 played a major role. And yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. And I'm really interested in how people in like 20 years react to reading this book or reading books like that and how they will feel about the pandemic. And speaking of COVID-19, Stephen King is an author who always tries to incorporate current events into his novels. There's not only mentions about COVID-19, there's also mentions of Black Lives Matter and about like kind of the culture war in the US. And in his afterword, he kind of talks about how he likes writing characters who have the same viewpoints as him. For example, he can very much identify with Holly Gibney, who does very much believe that COVID-19 is real, is very conscious about it. But he's also writing characters who have like another viewpoint, and that this is important to distinguish when you're criticizing authors for their work, that the viewpoint of their characters does not always align with their own viewpoints. And another thing you notice while reading this novel is that if you've read a lot of older Stephen King books, like for example It or Pet Sematary or The Stand and stuff like that, you probably know that in his beginnings, Stephen King had a hard time portraying people of color and Black people. He often made use of the trope of the magical Negro. For example, look at John Coffey in The Green Mile. And he's gotten a lot of criticism and a lot of flack for that. But his newer novels, and also in this novel as well, he really shows that he has learned a lot and he's changed his viewpoints, and I think that shows that he's really a good person, and like the personality he shows on social media, for example, is like who he actually is, what he actually thinks. And I think he's very aware of where he came from, and that I wouldn't say that he ever was an active racist. I think he was born into racism, even if it's like positive racism, but he really came around and changed his view and tried to learn how to better portray people of color. And I think he does a great job with the people of color in here. And yeah, this is basically all I wanted to say about this book, at least at this point in time. Maybe somewhere in the future I will make like a spoiler review, because there's many things I want to discuss about this. For example, I could dig a lot deeper into this growing older theme, but I don't want to, because I don't want to spoil anything. And yeah, this is basically what I wanted to say about this book. I hope you liked my review. If you did, let me know. And Also, let me know if you've already read this book and what you thought about it. I will probably be going back to scripting my videos because this was fucking exhausting. I had to refilm several points of this video. I mean, you probably won't notice this in the final video, but yeah, it was quite exhausting for me, but I hope you liked it still. So with that, I hope you have a great day, have a great week, and see you next time. Goodbye.